Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Real Birding Podcast, the show where we crack open the world of birding and talk about our own birding adventures. I'm Will Keller, coming to you from Charlotte, North Carolina.
And I'm Caleb Putnam in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Caleb, I'm excited for this episode because we are going to be discussing birding in one of the most far-flung locations on this planet, birding in Thailand, of all places. And I can tell you, even I, as a somewhat experienced birder that's gone to Colombia and Europe and other places in South America and Central America, even that seems a little bit intimidating. So I'm thinking this episode will be great to sort of demonstrate to people what it's like to bird in places that are even more remote and exotic than, the common Costa Rica, Yucatan Peninsula sort of birding places.
I'm right with you. It's like kind of bird on a foreign planet if you haven't been in that continent. So we really look forward to this one.
That's right. Before we do that, let's get into the bird quiz. Last week, we showed you guys photos of fulvous whistling ducks, but it was a unique experience because these ducks were trying to cross the road and they needed assistance from a, what do we call them?
Moving vehicles.
I was going to say like generous benefactor. We're talking about different things.
Yes. Good Samaritan. From a good Samaritan.
Good Samaritan. All right, we finally got there. Miraculously, a listener originally guessed black-bellied whistling duck, but then eventually Tim Cornish got this correct with fulvous whistling duck. That is an insanely good, I would say, guess. I doubt it was a guess with Tim. I'll bet he did some pretty serious research on what that bird was.
Yeah, that was a really hard one. And in fact, that process that you just laid out was exactly what we were going for, that you would think, oh, that looks like a whistling duck, kind of goosey and weird in the face. And you're right. But it was not the common black-bellied. It was the rare fulvous, which for whatever reason does not nest in cavities, unlike black-bellied. And that was the key clue that we gave. So Thanks to the anonymous Good Samaritan for those photos.
All right.
And for saving the birds' lives.
It's always good. Well, let's get into our bird of the week and then birding Thailand. Let's do it. Caleb, how we doing?
I'm great, Will. How about yourself?
Can't complain. Although it is about 10 straight days of rain down here is the forecast in Charlotte, North Carolina, which puts a damper even on the most extreme of birders. There's only so long you can go stand out in the rain looking for birds, especially this time of year.
Well, my next question for you are we already in the summer doldrums anyway? Because once migration starts to end here, it's not that it's not great to go out, but you have to target stuff in specific areas, and it's a way more effort for less return. So it feels like a bit of a letdown when migration ends,
Yeah. Well, dude, did you see that some guys in Chicago, they did a Cook County Big Day and they broke the record by like 10 species. And this was like June 1st or 2nd.
Wow.
And you should have seen all the migrating warblers they still got. What a weird spring for migrants, huh?
I was out taking a group from out of state around Michigan for about the last 5 days, and we had scarcely a migrant anywhere. And it was all searching for territorial stuff, which was very interesting because they wanted to see as many warblers as possible. And during migration, all you have to do is go to one spot and you get them all. Right now, we were struggling on some of the easy, like magnolia warbler. You have to target the exact microhabitat that thing is in, because you don't just bump into them in these other habitats. So it was a very interesting exercise in you're using your bird knowledge, your microhabitat knowledge, to try to play the odds right. And plus, it was like 80 plus degrees and windy by noon every day. Yeah. So the doldrums came quick, and it was very, very fun and a little bit challenging.
Yeah, you must have gotten Kirtland's warbler, right?
Indeed, that was the focal bird naturally for folks coming to Michigan. I have many friends from other states and countries that want to come see it, but to actually get folks to commit and do it was a real treat. And it was so fun. We ended up getting them a really close look at a singing male, which is not a gimme up there. You know this. Some of the times you end up just with distant looks where you can barely see it above the jack pines. But we got lucky.
A lot of herd onlys too.
Indeed.
Hey, speaking of herd only, what's one group that we have in Michigan that is very often only heard and sort of seldom seen? I think the cuckoos are a great example of this. And that segues well into our Bird of the Week segment. Caleb, can you lay this on us?
So this week we have a very cool set of photos and videos from Marie Rust of Bitely, Michigan, which is about an hour north of Grand Rapids, up in Newaygo County, up in the gorgeous woods of the Manistee National Forest, where I would love to live up in a place like this myself and get out of the city one of these days. So Marie went out into the back 40 of the property and was exploring in the tamarack swamp of all places, and noticed something a flutter in one of the tamarack branches, and kind of zoomed in on it and found this yellow-billed cuckoo sitting in a cup of a nest, building the nest as it was actually singing from in there. Check this out.
No way. Oh, I'm not getting the audio coming through to my side, but I know exactly what it's doing.
And then as it was doing that, the bird's mate came in and started provisioning sticks for it. So you can see it here
Whoa.
carrying this, and really nice big rufous patches in the wing and the big white things in the tail.
That is just amazing. And what a
Look at
cool
that.
bird. I don't know that I've ever seen a yellow-billed cuckoo that well.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's hard to get looks at these guys in general, but then to have one that's like doing these extra secretive things that it doesn't want you to see, and you end up getting these front row seats to it, is pretty phenomenal.
I'm going to show my ignorance here, but aren't cuckoos sort of famous nest parasites? I guess I wasn't aware that yellow-billed cuckoos and American cuckoos were an exception to that. Is that true for black-billed and yellow-billed cuckoos? They build their own nests?
Great question, Will. They are facultative brood parasites, not obligate. And the difference there is that they only do the brood parasitism sometimes, and other times they do their own nest. The brown-headed cowbirds in general, are obligate brood parasites that never build their own nest.
Fascinating.
So really interesting biology on that. Marie also sent in this series from the exact same property, and was not only watching the yellow-billed cuckoos, but had this black-billed cuckoo also coming into focus when its mate also came in with food. And watch what happens here. Watch this. Copulation time. It's not only provisioning and giving the female the food, and then witness the actual copulation. So for secretive birds like cuckoos, you're lucky to see them, but you are extremely lucky to actually witness these really obscure events like this. So thank you to Marie for sharing these photos and giving us the ability to put them out there. That is a fantastic series.
Yeah.
And I have to also say, we had cuckoos the whole week that I was leading folks around. The cuckoo invasion of both species is on up here. There are tent caterpillars all over the place. That's the primary food source that seems to predict whether both of the species show up. And we got like 3 black-billed cuckoos on a checklist. I can go a whole year and get 0 of those in this county. And we had like both species on multiple checklists all throughout lower Michigan. It was crazy.
That's amazing. Lucky you, man. Okay, Caleb, let's get into the meat and potatoes of this episode, which is birding Thailand. You know, like I said in the intro, even for us, Thailand is a little bit extreme. It's a different language. It's a different currency. It's a different sort of political structure, which could make you a little bit uneasy. What brought you to Thailand? And did you have any sort of misconceptions about it beforehand that you sort of worked through while you were there? Or what was that process like?
Okay, so this was a very strange trip that we did in a way that I don't think the average birder would ever even consider doing. And so our friend Chase and I had been sort of mulling the idea of going to Australia, because it's just, and Asia and Australia are 2 of the last continents that I needed to add. So that they were goals, sort of long-term goals of ours. And we looked at the calendar and we suddenly realized we both had like a 3-week period that was 5 days away from the day we had this conversation. And we had the money, we had the vacation time. And I said, Chase, why don't we just do this? So we bought tickets 5 days before we flew to Australia, and we had to do a hacker fare because we had to go on the cheap. And that put us through Seoul, South Korea first, and then through Bangkok, Thailand second. And then we had a day in Bangkok, and then we flew to Australia from there on a totally separate thing, right? So we did 2 weeks in Australia, and then we came back to Bangkok and had 4 days. So we had 5 days total in Thailand, sandwiched around the Australia trip. So that's how this happened. I mean, we literally didn't even have the field guide when we purchased the tickets, and we didn't know any of the birds. We didn't know the sites. We were thankfully able to put together, through Facebook connections and personal friends from Australia and US who know some of the guides in Thailand. We were able to hit all the guides with just a quick message like, hey, we're looking for somebody. Do you know anybody that could help us during these dates? And we got lucky. And Inkayutsa R, who goes by David, super nice guy, a great friend of ours now. He jumped on it and he helped us.
That's awesome.
But it was extraordinary circumstances. Well, like he said, I can guide you, but I can't drive. You guys need to go to the Bangkok airport, get your own car, and pick me up, and then we'll go around together. But he couldn't drive us. And little did I know what I was getting into, because that country has some of the craziest driving in the world. It was some of the most dangerous driving I have ever done. Absolutely nerve-wracking, and I do not recommend it.
Talk me through this. So you're at the airport, you go to whatever the version of Enterprise is in Bangkok, and you rent a car and you get on the road. What's your first observation?
Well, we don't have a cell phone that has internet, so we're operating on offline maps that we had pre-downloaded, and the intersections are horrible. The accuracy is really, really low. So it tells you go up here and turn left. It takes you 40 minutes to get through traffic, and when you finally get there, there's a barrier in the way, and you can't turn left, and you end up going a mile ahead and turning around. And in fact, when we were trying to get to the airport to come home at the end of this, we couldn't figure it out, and we got totally turned around in traffic. We had like 6 hours to get to the airport, and we almost missed it, and it was so stressful. So moral of the story on that is, I don't recommend driving yourself unless you're either fluent in Thai or that the roads extremely well. Just hire a courier who knows it all. That's all you're gonna have to do, and it's much safer because they know how to avoid all the little bikes, and there's constantly just motorbikes going by both sides of your vehicle all the time, and it never stops. So it was quite nerve-wracking, but we survived.
Yeah. So I imagine that in Thailand, like a lot of sort of developing countries, the habitat can be few and far between, especially in densely populated areas, which is somewhat true in the US and Europe. But especially in the US, it seems like it's a little bit easier to get access to some pretty pristine habitat. Was that true in Thailand, or could you just get out and find birds really easily?
It's a real mix in that country because there's a lot of denuded habitat, very, very urbanized around the greater Bangkok area and all the cities. And then there's like farmyard or excuse me, there's farmland that you drive through. But when you finally hit a national park, you get an intact, humongous area of forest. Their reserve network is actually quite good. I wouldn't do the trails without a guide. You really want somebody who knows where they're going. And there are things like elephants in the woods. There's like king cobras. We didn't see them, but we saw their elephant tracks. And
wow,
if you wouldn't want to get lost in this place, I'll leave it like that. So, but when we arrived, first thing you notice is it's 100 degrees out all the time. I mean, just stiflingly hot for a northerner like us. It was so funny because when we first got to this park, when we arrived here, we had just been studying the book in the plane. We only had it for a day or two. And I kind of secretly love discovering birds like this because it feels like you're going back to when you were a kid learning them here. You just know nothing about it.
Absolutely.
Because it was so funny. One of the first things that happened is we got this bird that ended up being one of the most common birds around. And we were flipping through the book and we literally could not figure out what it was. It took us like 15 minutes to figure out what it was. And then we saw it like everywhere we went. And this is the bird here. This is the Oriental magpie robin. It just hops around in the city parks like real commonly. Just there's 5 in view at once. And I'm like, what family is this thing? It's called a robin. It's called a magpie, but I think it's the monarchs. The Southeastern Asian islands in Australia, that whole region, there's these groups of birds, families, or maybe even orders, I'm not even sure, that are just totally unfamiliar to folks who bird in the Americas. Yeah. So that really was kind of indicative of how the whole trip went. I mean, it was constant discovery, stunning birds too.
I like that observation of going places where there's not only different species, but different families and orders of birds. I remember going down to South America and Central America, I guess Costa Rica for the first time, and seeing all these tree runners and fernariids and thinking, how am I ever going to learn to identify these? There's like 30 of them. and they all basically look the same, and I don't have any reference. I can't compare them against anything else. I know zero of them. It really does take you back to square one.
It really did. I mean, you're learning everything on the fly, and people, I'm sure the advanced birders listening will just want to gouge their ears out. Like, how could you do this? You have to prep and you have to, have it all this. I used to do that, and I'm not saying there aren't advantages, but there was a real fun element of learning at real time as we went. It was super enjoyable. Check this thing out. This blew us away. I don't think I even knew what a minivit was. Do you?
Sorry, Caleb, that's a red start.
I know, that's what I said. It's like a red start, but acting a little bit more like a flycatcher. And this was the only place you got the small minivit was in the city park. And when you went out to the wildlands and the jungle, it was other ones, but not this one. And then we noticed this gigantic turquoise thing flying through the park and landing on a wire. I mean, it's like crow sized, but it's the color of like, a mot or a bee eater. And it's this Indo-Chinese roller.
Wow.
I mean, stunningly large birds, Will, and just bright aquamarine turquoise. Like, it's just shocking. I mean, we don't have anything like this.
I had no idea rollers were that big. Are all the rollers about that size?
I don't know. I don't know. It's just wild. And then spotted dove, which is in like LA, and I think they might be blinking out in LA now, but they're like in aviaries and stuff. And then stuff like zebra dove, which is actually in Australia too. So just a lot of
in Hawaii as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah, Hawaii's got all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, Hawaii is like a total hodgepodge of all sorts of different groups of birds now, for better or for worse.
So that was day one, and then we went to Australia right away. And then after the Australia part of it, maybe we can do a different episode on the Australia one at some point. When we came back is when we picked up David and drove up to Khao Yai National Park, which is it was probably 3 to 4 hours northeast of Bangkok. And it was a stressful drive for a minute there, and then it gradually got more and more rural, and we were able to get out in the jungle and kind of escape things.
Yeah.
Oh, I have to show this. So we're standing there in that park, and we noticed this Eurasian tree sparrow kind of dangling inside of a tree. And if you look carefully, you'll notice that this green thing right here is not a leaf like all the rest of them. And it was I think it was a whip snake.
No way.
It had the bird by the head, and the bird was squealing. And look how skinny the thing was.
Wow.
And we're like, is this venomous? We don't even know. We're walking around the park, like trying not to, get envenomated or whatever.
Yeah. I'm sure Chase put that on iNet. That's a really cool observation.
Yeah. We definitely did. So let me give you an idea. I have to play a couple of videos of what it was like walking the habitat. All right, so this is walking around in Khao Yai National Park. The roads there are really nice. They're paved, really easy to drive on, and there's a trail system that goes through the forest as well, but really easy access.
Yeah, it looks really, really nice.
And then, Will, once you get off the road, there were pretty well-groomed trails through the jungle, most places that David took us through and knew about. And I would say it was kind of the wet season when we were there. So that invited the terrestrial leeches to be out, which they were. Yeah. I have to say the character of the jungle there it definitely feels weird. I can't put my finger on it. It didn't feel exactly like being in Colombia, Ecuador, or Costa Rica. I have heard from many birders that there's a different feel and character to the habitats and jungle, and just to the birding experience in general when you're in Asian tropical forests versus North American and South American tropical forests. And that really rung true to me. And I don't know if it's just that the birds are so different. There's all kinds of just unfamiliar things in the forest. And it was also it seemed extra difficult to get on stuff. Like we had to really target things. I don't know if the impression is correct, but a lot of the species were really uncommon, and we encountered them maybe one time in the entire 4 days of walking the trails. And I'm not saying it's not like that in South America, but it seems like a lot of stuff is easier in the Americas than it was over here. It felt like a bit of a struggle.
Did you get into the sort of foraging mixed flocks of small birds? I know that's like a key feature of birding in the neotropics is getting into these flocks with, sometimes 50, 60, 70 birds with 25 species in them. You know what I mean?
I would dare say there was no such thing, or if it did exist here, it was to a minimal extent.
Hmm.
And so one of the groups that did qualify for that loosely is the old world leaf warblers.
Hmm.
So they're not Perulidae like ours. These are things like this yellow-browed warbler.
The Philoscopus warblers, right?
Yes, exactly. The Philoscopus. There's a bunch of these species that are like breeding in like Siberia and maybe Japan and Mongolia, that whole northern East Asian region. They all converge in the tropics in the wintertime. And they all, if you think epidnacs are hard, these things are really hard.
Oh
And they
yeah.
all converge at the same time. And it's like minuscule differences in the chip notes and stuff that you have to decipher to figure it out. And, like for example, this Arctic warbler, we didn't know what it was at first. So I'm just like, what, I'm going to take as many photos as I can, recordings. And then a lot of them we had to identify when we got home. So,
Yep. That
and
sounds
in
about
compared
right.
to, right. And compared to Europe, like there's a bunch of species in the mix that aren't even as well known as the Western Palearctic stuff that's in Europe. And it's really hard to see these things well. I mean, they're mostly up high in the trees. Just it was a struggle birding there. I'm not gonna lie.
Do you know how many lifers you got in Thailand while you were there?
Yes, dude. I got 218 lifers in basically 5 days of effort, and mostly at three locations. It was Khao Yai National Park, and then we went down for the spoon-billed sandpiper at Pak Tale, which we did not get, unfortunately, because we were a little bit too early in the fall. Could have been there in that early week of October, but it just wasn't the year that we were there. But I think they showed up like a week or two later. So
Yeah, and for listeners who aren't aware of the spoon-billed sandpiper, it's exactly what it sounds like. It looks like a sort of typical Caligula sandpiper with a spoon-shaped bill, and they're functionally on the brink of extinction. Like at any
yep.
moment, they could sort of blink out. There's only about 150 birds out there right now,
I don't
maybe a
even
few
think it's
more.
I don't think it's that many. I don't have
Yeah.
an exact number, but I thought it was down to like a couple dozen or a few dozen and
Mm.
going in the wrong direction largely. This is one of the last areas where we know that they spend the winter. So everybody goes there to see them. And it was a
Yeah.
spectacular shorebird site. Oh my gosh. I mean, the place was loaded with shorebirds. Check out this cloud of Tibetan sand plovers.
Whoa.
Um, yeah, just thousands and thousands in a way that you're not used to this in the temperate zone except during migration. But
Hmm.
I mean, these are all gray colored wintering things. There's like Nordman's green shank can be in there, which is another like really rare yellow legsy thing.
Oh yeah.
I think it was redneck stint was in there. It was very, very spectacular spot, man.
Yeah, I've heard that there's something about. Wait, was this at the on the Yellow Sea, or is this a different body of water?
Don't know.
Either
Um,
way, I've just heard this region is a lot more important than just about any region in North America to migrating shorebirds. It's a group that's declining unilaterally. Almost every single shorebird species globally is declining because they're almost all of them are long distant migrants. So there's a lot of different factors that they rely on in their life stages. But the point that I'm getting to is you see photos of this region in China, in Japan, in Korea, in Thailand, Cambodia, with just clouds and clouds of millions of shorebirds. And I just don't think we really get that so much in North America. Am I wrong?
I think that you can with like Western sandpipers in certain places on the West Coast and Bombay Hook at its prime in Delaware there, places like that. But by and large, no. I mean, it's just there's a very different flavor over there than what you're used to in the Americas.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, those shorebirds are incredibly threatened, and those shorebird habitats are incredibly threatened. And it's tough in poorer countries like this to find the political will to come together and protect everything.
Yeah.
Just a quick look at some of the fascinating families that were there. So the hornbills have to be mentioned. These birds are bizarre, Will. If you have never been to Asia or Africa and seen them, they're like toucans, but they're not. They're very different, and they're not in the same group. Hilariously, when we arrived, we saw a billboard that had a toucan on and was saying or suggesting that was present in Thailand, but like toucan Sam or whatever.
Yeah.
When all they have is hornbills. Toucans are only from the New World.
Hmm.
And we got several species of those. Woodpeckers, just incredible green colors, and like the flame back had like a big yellow patch on the back.
Yeah.
Weird things like the almost what does this even look like? It's It's a female of the scarlet minivet. It's just
Wow.
totally unique. Like you're just families of stuff that you're just like, what is this thing? And the
What?
plumage patterns and colors don't look like the patterns you see in the Americas.
That's a Dr. Seuss bird if I ever seen one.
Yeah. And then you've got this dollar bird. It acts like an olive-sided flycatcher, but it's huge and it sits at the tip top, and it's in Australia and the islands of Southeast Asia and mainland Thailand as well. So like,
Wow.
there's a lot of
Yeah, Australasia.
Yeah, there you go. Sunbirds. So this is the group that replaces hummingbirds in the other hemisphere, since they don't have any hummingbirds over there. And they were very little and very colorful and ornate looking.
Oh yeah.
Multiple species too.
Great example of convergent evolution.
Yeah, arguably it is a good example of convergent evolution. Although they don't look exactly the same, and I would say these guys are more foliage gleaning, like warblers and stuff. But for the most part, when we saw the sunbirds, there was multiple species, and they were pretty common. Once you get to the place, you just figure out what species of sunbird is there, and then you bump into them a lot.
Well, one thing I remember from the hummingbird gardens in Colombia is they were using a lot of plants that co-evolved or have relationships with sunbirds in the old world. But they plant them in these gardens in South America, and the hummingbirds use them because those niches are so similar. The sort of nectaring hummingbird stuff. Yeah.
Super interesting. And then I have to mention broadbills. I don't think there's anything like these birds. They sit in the treetops. They somewhat act like a flycatcher, roughly. And the color patterns on these things were absolutely bizarre. And they were not common. They were like hard to find. The guide had to hear it, and then we had to track it down for a long time and get looks through the canopy, like through our scope. But when you finally got on them, and just stunning. This long-tailed broadbill.
Yeah.
Green pigeons.
Colors are
like, you know how Australia has all these green colored pigeons with yellow, and like they'll have pink and stuff going on in the chest and head. Just a totally bizarre experience. And look at this thing, white-browed scimitar babbler. Like, what is that?
It's a yellow-billed cuckoo.
Yeah, not really. Kinda. I mean, it's like, yeah, it goes to show that we just don't have a frame of reference for what the birds are like over there. So yeah. It was really, really neat. Bizarre woodpeckers. Well, look at this thing. And really hard to get photos of. This thing is tiny, yet it looks like a pileated in the head. When he got on it, he was like, "Oh, this is a really good one. This is a really rare one. Like, come running." You know, we went running to get there.
Black and buff woodpecker. Wow.
Yep. Hair-crested drongo. So there's these. I don't even know. And honestly, this trip was 6 years ago, so it's surprisingly difficult to keep track of it all in your head when you're not going regularly. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Here's a leaf bird, a blue-winged leaf bird. And then, I would be remiss not to mention the crazy pheasants that they have walking around in the jungle there. So we got really lucky to bump into this in the car one morning as we were driving in. Like I think we took 2 or 3 mornings to try for this at dawn, and that third one we finally got them. That's on the cover of the field guide.
That's amazing. Looks like a chicken.
Yep. And speaking of chicken, glad you brought that up.
There's your segue.
Red jungle fowl. Yes, the perfect segue. So the progenitor of all modern chickens is the red jungle fowl of Southeast Asia. They are present in Thailand. And the one morning we were driving around, all of a sudden we hear cock-a-doodle-doo. And I'm like, wait a minute. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a farmyard bird here. And sure enough, it was a wild bird. They're kind of wary. And they're like walking around on the edge of the jungle, kind of out in the opening. And then they dart back away from you. They don't look that. They don't look like all the crazy pompadour breeds or whatever that we have here too. They're a little bit boring almost compared to what we're used to seeing on the farm.
Absolutely.
So that was kind of a trip. And then the trogons. Will, did you know that trogons are in the old world and in the new world tropics?
I learned this fairly recently, embarrassingly recently, but yeah, I did know that.
So I think I had heard it, but until you get over there and look at how these look similar to American ones, but there's like, you can tell it's really odd. The color patterns are weird. The beak shape's a little different. They still have like all this, barring in the wings and tail and whatnot. But actually, this one's missing its tail. It's supposed to be a lot longer than this. But kind of looked
Gotcha.
into this, and it turns out that the New World ones are in a different family than the Old World ones. And interestingly, the Cuban trogon is apparently more closely related to the Old World ones than to the New World ones. There's a little twist for you there that I don't know how you explain that, but
Yeah. How
apparently
funny
the
is
genetic
that?
data, yeah, bear it out. So, and then another thing that we noticed, which was super interesting. This was October, so it was like mid-October. Asia has many of the same migrant birds that are kind of breeding up in the I don't know if you call what they call the boreal zone of the old world, but things that are migrating to the temperate zone and then coming back to the tropics in the winter, like hoopoe. So, you just learn a lot about migration dynamics and what it's like to bird in these places. You really have to go to figure it out. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, Caleb, before we wrap this up, I just want you to give one tip to somebody who might be considering going to Thailand. What's the most important thing they should consider in planning that trip?
Well, I mean, I would say to folks, you'd probably want to make a decision ahead of time. Are you wanting to go where money is less of an object and you care more about comfort and so on? What I would probably do is hire a company that will just pick you up at the airport in a convenient van and take you the entire time. That would eliminate so many logistical headaches, but it's going to be a lot more money. You can do it on the fly. If you were crazy adventurous, you could rent the car yourself and go for it. It's not like you can't, but it'd be pretty easy to get in a pickle there. And
Yeah.
emergency services aren't the best from what I've heard. Like it was scary in that sense. But I really like the middle zone where you kind of hire a guide for parts of it, and perhaps you drive and meet them where at the destinations, or you get a different guide at each spot. I think once you're out of the big complexes, it's pretty easy to drive around. It's really just
Yeah.
in the cities where it's an issue. And it was a safe country. I mean, it didn't feel dangerous. I never felt threatened, even in Bangkok, and certainly not in the rural areas. Everybody was extremely friendly. The food was cheap and really, really tasty. Super spicy. You
Hmm.
get back from a day where you've been hiking 6 to 8 miles in 100-degree temperatures, and you're hungry as can be, and you get soup with all these vegetables, and it's like super, super spicy. So you want to shovel it in, but you're dying of the spice. Like, it was
It's
an
not,
experience.
it's not exactly what you need after a long day hiking. Yeah.
Right, right.
Well, Caleb, thanks for presenting on that Thailand trip. There are so many good trips that you and I have done. You've done more than me, but there's lots to talk about. So, if you, the listener, like this sort of breakdown of birding in Thailand, let us know if you'd like more videos like this, and we'll break down any place we've ever birded. Before we get out of here, we got to hit our bird quiz. We forgot to do it in the opening segment. So,
Almost forgot.
as a reminder, we are going to play for you the song or call of a North American breeding bird, and you are going to guess the name of this bird in the comments. And if you get it right, you might get a shout out at the beginning of next week's episode. Here we go. That's all you get it. Back it up to get another listen. Otherwise, drop that in the comments. Without further ado, we will see you next week. Thanks for watching.
Peace.